The town was small, and life was simple. People walked through the streets every morning with tired eyes and heavy hearts. They lived their days in silence, following the same routine, never daring to step outside the line. No one asked questions. No one tried to change anything. The quietness of this place was not peace, it was fear, hidden in everyday smiles. Among these people lived a young woman named Amina. She was not rich, not powerful, and not even well known. To most, she was just another face in the crowd. She worked in a small shop, folding clothes and arranging shelves, her presence almost invisible. But inside her heart lived something different, an unspoken fire, a quiet strength that no one could see. Every evening, she sat near her window, looking at the world outside. She noticed things others ignored, the injustice, the unfair rules, the way the poor were treated as if they were invisible. She heard whispers of pain from her neighbors, stories people were too afraid to share aloud. Amina listened, but she said nothing. For years, she remained silent, because in her town, silence was safer than truth. But deep inside, silence was slowly breaking her. One day, something small happened. Something so quiet that most people would not even notice. But for Amina, it was the beginning. She was walking home after work when she saw an old man being pushed aside in the marketplace. His clothes were torn, his hands shaking, and yet no one stopped to help him. The crowd kept moving, pretending nothing happened. Amina stood still. For a moment, she thought of doing the same, walking away, staying safe. But her heart refused. Slowly, she stepped forward. She bent down, lifted the old man's basket, and gave him her hand. She helped him stand, even when others looked away. It was such a small act, so quiet, so ordinary. But in that silence, something powerful began. The man looked into her eyes, and his expression changed. There was gratitude, but also surprise, as if he had never expected kindness in a place ruled by fear. A few people in the crowd noticed her action. They did not speak, but their eyes followed her. Some felt ashamed. Others felt curious. Amina said nothing. She just helped the man walk to the edge of the street and placed his basket back into his hands. Her lips did not form words, but her actions spoke louder than any speech. That night, as she sat near her window again, Amina could not forget the old man's face. She realized that sometimes even the smallest step can shake the ground. But she also knew something else. Acts like this did not stay hidden for long. In her town, kindness was often seen as rebellion. And rebellion was dangerous. Still, something inside her refused to stop. The next morning, whispers began to move through the marketplace. "Did you see her?" someone asked. "The girl who helped the old man." People talked quietly, afraid to be heard, but the story spread like smoke. Some dismissed it as nothing. Others felt a strange pull in their hearts. It was just one act, but it carried weight. And for Amina, life would never be the same again. Because once a quiet act begins, it has the power to echo. The world around her did not change instantly. The powerful still ruled, the people still stayed silent, and fear still hung in the air. But somewhere, in hidden corners, her small act planted a seed. A seed that no one could see yet, but soon it would grow. The audience wonders, what will happen when this small act reaches the ears of those in power? What danger will Amina face? The answer lies in the days to come. Days passed, but the memory of that small act did not leave the town. People carried it quietly in their hearts, like a secret they were afraid to speak. In the marketplace, when someone stumbled, a few eyes now turned, waiting, wondering, would someone step forward again? Amina did not think of herself as a hero. To her, helping the old man had been natural, almost impossible not to do. But she began to notice the way people looked at her now. Their eyes carried questions. Some were filled with admiration, others with fear. A few even avoided her, afraid that being close to her might bring trouble. In this town, even kindness had a price. One evening, after finishing her work at the small shop, Amina walked home slowly. The streets were quieter than usual. She could sense an invisible tension in the air. As she turned the corner, she saw a group of children sitting on the steps of a broken wall. Their clothes were ragged, and their hands were empty. They looked at her with wide, hungry eyes. Amina stopped. She had only a small piece of bread in her bag, the dinner she had saved for herself. Her stomach was empty too, but when she saw the children, she could not ignore them. She walked closer, broke the bread into pieces, and handed it to them. The children ate quickly, smiling with relief. They did not thank her with words, but with shining eyes. For Amina, that was enough. Yet again, someone had been watching. An old woman, carrying a basket of fruit, stood at the corner. She saw the way Amina gave away her food. Later, in whispers, the old woman shared the story. She gave her own meal to hungry children, the woman said softly. She is not afraid. By the next morning, the whispers had spread. Amina was becoming more than just another girl in the marketplace. She was slowly becoming a symbol. But symbols are dangerous. In the crowded streets, where silence was the law, even the smallest defiance could be seen as a challenge. The rulers of the town wanted obedience, not kindness. They wanted people to stay quiet, to follow orders, and never to act against the invisible wall of fear. And now, a young woman's quiet actions were starting to break that wall, piece by piece. One afternoon, while Amina was arranging clothes in the shop, her friend Sami entered. He was nervous, looking over his shoulder before speaking. Amina, he whispered, people are talking about you. She looked up, confused. Talking about what? Sami leaned closer. About the old man, about the children. They say you are different. Some admire you. But others think you will bring trouble. Amina's heart beat faster. Trouble was the last thing she wanted. She had not spoken against anyone, had not shouted in the streets, had not broken any rules. She had only helped. How could that be dangerous? But in her town, sometimes kindness was louder than words. That night, she could not sleep. She thought about the people who noticed her. She thought about the hungry children. She thought about the silence that ruled her town. And deep inside, she realized something important. One small step had already been taken. There was no turning back. The next day, the marketplace was busier than usual. Merchants shouted, coins clinked, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. But beneath the noise, something else was moving, whispers, glances, silent signals. Amina walked through the crowd with her usual quiet steps. As she passed, a woman carrying a basket of apples dropped one to the ground. Before the woman could bend to pick it up, a young boy rushed forward and gave it back to her. It was a small act, almost invisible, but Amina noticed. Their eyes met, and the boy gave her a quick smile. The spark was spreading. One by one, people began to mirror the quiet courage. Someone shared food. Someone else helped a stranger. They were small things, almost hidden, but they carried meaning. And slowly, the silence of fear began to crack. But the rulers were not blind. In the tall house near the center of town, where the officials gathered, whispers reached them too. They heard of a girl in the marketplace, a girl whose actions were turning into stories. They did not like the sound of it. For them, every whisper of courage was a threat. One official slammed his fist on the table. This must stop. Before it grows. And so, while Amina walked home, unaware of the danger, a shadow began to form around her life. Her quiet act had become the first step of something greater. But with every step forward, the risk grew heavier. The question was no longer if people would notice. It was how far would this go, and how long before someone tried to silence her forever. The town was changing, though no one dared to say it aloud. On the surface, life looked the same. People still walked with lowered eyes, still obeyed the rules, still avoided trouble. But underneath, something was shifting. A small light had entered their hearts, and that light came from one girl's quiet steps. Amina did not plan to start anything. She only wanted to live with kindness, to help when help was needed. But in a place where kindness was rare, every action became a story, and every story became a spark. One morning, as she passed through the marketplace, she noticed a young mother struggling with her child. The woman's basket had fallen, and fruits rolled across the dusty ground. People saw it, but they walked past. No one wanted to stop, afraid that showing compassion might bring unwanted eyes upon them. Without hesitation, Amina bent down and began to gather the fruits. A few children followed her lead, running to pick up apples and placing them back in the basket. The young mother's face softened with relief, her eyes filled with tears. It was another small act, but this time it was not done alone. Others had joined in. From that day, something new began to grow. In the narrow streets and crowded alleys, people started noticing each other. They began to copy Amina's quiet actions. A boy gave his bread to a beggar. A woman helped her neighbor carry water. Two men lifted a cart together when one was too weak to move it alone. The town, once silent with fear, now carried whispers of kindness. But whispers travel quickly. Inside the tall house where the official sat, the news spread faster than ever. Guards reported unusual behavior. People are helping each other, one said. They act as if rules no longer control them. The officials frowned. To them, obedience was safety, and kindness was rebellion. If people found courage in small acts, they might one day dare to rise against power. One official leaned back in his chair and muttered, "This girl, this Amina, she must be stopped." But out in the streets, Amina did not know that her name had reached the ears of the powerful. She was too busy living each day quietly, unaware that her footsteps were echoing louder than she imagined. One evening, Sami, her closest friend, walked beside her. His voice was low, almost fearful. "Amina," he said, "do you see what's happening? People are changing. They are not the same as before. It is because of you." She shook her head. "No, Sami. It is not me. It is them. They always wanted to be free, but they were afraid. I only did what anyone should do." Sami looked at her carefully. "But don't you see? You gave them permission. By standing up in silence, you showed them that they can too." Her heart trembled at his words. She had never thought of herself as a leader, never dreamed of guiding anyone. But now, faces turned toward her, eyes followed her steps, and hearts mirrored her courage. Still, not everyone was happy. Some people warned her in hushed tones. "Be careful, Amina. The officials are watching." Others avoided her completely, afraid that being near her might bring danger. Fear was still alive, and fear was powerful. But something stronger than fear had begun to take root. One night, as she returned home, she found a small piece of cloth tied to her door. On it was written a single word in shaky handwriting, "Hope." She held it in her hand for a long time, her eyes filling with tears. Someone out there had been touched by her quiet acts. Someone was brave enough to write the word that the town had forgotten. That simple piece of cloth told her the truth. This was no longer just about her. A movement had begun. But every movement has its price. The very next day, soldiers appeared in the marketplace. Their boots struck the ground hard, their faces cold. They stood in silence, watching the people, their presence a warning. The town grew tense again, fear crawling back into the air. Amina felt the weight of their eyes on her. She lowered her head, pretending not to notice. But deep inside, she knew the truth. Her quiet acts had woken something that the rulers could no longer ignore. And while she walked home that evening, one question burned in her mind. How long before they come for me? The soldiers did not speak. They only stood in the center of the marketplace, their eyes sharp, their boots planted like stone. Their silence was louder than shouts. Everyone understood the message. The rulers were watching. For a few days, fear returned to the town. People walked quickly, heads down, avoiding each other. The whispers that once carried hope now grew quiet again. The spark that had started spreading seemed in danger of dying. Amina felt the weight of it. She noticed the way people avoided her eyes, the way her friends spoke less, as if they were afraid even to be seen with her. At night, she sat by her window, wondering if she had made a mistake. Was she foolish to believe small acts could change anything? But then, she remembered the children eating her bread. She remembered the old man in the market. She remembered the cloth tied to her door with the word hope. And she knew, even if fear tried to return, the spark had already touched hearts. It could not be erased. One morning, Amina entered the market again. The soldiers were there, watching. People kept their distance. Suddenly, a cart filled with wood tipped over, spilling logs onto the road. No one moved. Everyone stared in silence, afraid to act under the eyes of the soldiers. Amina stepped forward. Without a word, she bent down and began to lift the logs. For a moment, no one helped. The soldiers stared at her, their faces unreadable. Then, slowly, one young boy stepped forward, then a woman, then another man. Soon, several people were helping her, while others watched in awe. The cart was lifted. The road was clear. And though no words were spoken, the act was loud. The soldiers saw it too. One of them clenched his fists, his jaw tight. They did not stop her, not yet, but their eyes followed her with sharp suspicion. That evening, Sami came to see her. He looked pale, worried. "Amina," he whispered, "you must stop. They are angry. They think you are turning the people against them. If they decide you are dangerous, they will not hesitate to punish you." Amina listened quietly. She felt fear too, but her voice was calm. "Sami, I am not fighting them. I am only helping. If helping others is dangerous, then what kind of world are we living in?" Sami had no answer. He lowered his head, torn between fear and admiration. Days turned into weeks, and the tension grew heavier. The soldiers followed her with their eyes wherever she went. People whispered her name more carefully, afraid of being overheard. And yet, acts of kindness continued to spread. Neighbors began to share food. Strangers began to greet each other. The spark was alive. The rulers, however, were restless. Inside their tall house, they argued late into the night. "This girl has too much influence," one said. "She is dangerous," said another. "She must be silenced before it grows further." A plan was made. One evening, as Amina returned home, she noticed a shadow moving behind her. She turned quickly, but the street was empty. The next night, the same thing happened. She felt eyes watching her, though she saw no one. Her heart beat fast, but she did not run. She walked steadily, telling herself not to show fear. But inside, she knew, something was coming. The next day, while she was working in the shop, two soldiers entered. The shopkeeper froze, his hands trembling as they spoke. Their voices were cold. "We are looking for Amina." The shopkeeper's eyes darted to her, then back to them. He said nothing. Amina stepped forward, her hands steady though her heart raced. "I am Amina." The soldiers looked at her for a long moment, then one said, "You are to come with us." The shop fell silent. Customers lowered their eyes. No one moved to help. Sami, who had been standing nearby, clenched his fists but dared not speak. Amina took a deep breath. She did not resist. She did not beg. She simply walked between the soldiers as they led her away. The crowd outside watched in silence. Some faces showed fear, others sorrow. A few, however, carried something different, anger. For the first time, the town saw their quiet hope threatened. And in that moment, a new question filled the air. Would the people stay silent again, or would Amina's courage push them to finally rise? The marketplace felt different without Amina. Her quiet presence had become a part of daily life, and now the emptiness spoke louder than noise. People whispered to each other in hushed voices. The soldiers took her. Where is she now? Will she come back? But no one knew. Inside the tall house, Amina sat in a dimly lit room. The walls were bare, the air heavy. A single guard stood at the door, his eyes sharp, his hands resting on his weapon. Across the table sat an official, his face stern and cold. "You think you are clever," he said slowly. "You think your small acts mean something. But they do not. You are nothing but one girl. And if you continue, you will bring punishment not only on yourself but on your entire town." Amina looked at him quietly. She did not argue. She did not shout. But in her silence, there was strength. "Finally," she said in a calm voice, "if helping the weak is a crime, then perhaps the crime is greater than you imagine." The official's eyes narrowed. He leaned closer. "Be careful with your words. We can silence you in one breath." Amina's hands trembled under the table, but her eyes did not lower. "You can silence my voice," she said softly, "but you cannot silence what has already begun." The guard shifted uncomfortably. The official slammed his hand on the table, his anger sharp. But deep inside, even he knew the truth. Something had begun that could not easily be undone. Meanwhile, outside the tall house, the town was stirring. People who once lived in silence now gathered in small groups. They spoke cautiously, always checking if soldiers were near, but their words carried fire. "She gave bread to my children," one woman said. "She helped me when I fell," said a man. "She showed us we don't have to live in fear," whispered another. Slowly, courage spread from one heart to another. Sami, restless and worried, walked through the streets at night, speaking to whoever would listen. "They have taken her," he said. "If we stay silent, they will crush her. But if we stand together, maybe they will see that we are not afraid anymore." At first, people hesitated. The memory of fear was still strong. But one by one, voices agreed. "We cannot let her face this alone." For the first time in many years, the town began to gather, not in silence, but in unity. On the third day of Amina's capture, a large crowd formed outside the tall house. Men, women, children, all stood together, their eyes fixed on the heavy gates. They did not shout, they did not fight, but their presence itself was powerful. The soldiers at the gate shifted nervously. They had expected obedience, not this quiet sea of people. Inside, the officials grew uneasy. One said, "If this continues, it will grow out of control." Another replied, "Perhaps we should release her. She is stronger locked inside their hearts than she is inside these walls." The decision was difficult, but the pressure outside grew heavier with every hour. Finally, on the fourth day, the gates opened. 2 soldiers led Amina out. Her steps were slow, her face pale, but her eyes carried light. The crowd gasped, then slowly, a sound rose. Not shouting, not cheering, but something even stronger, silence filled with strength. Every person stood tall, their presence saying what their voices dared not, "We are with you." Amina looked at them, her heart overflowing. She realized this was no longer about her alone. The spark had become a fire. The movement had been born. That night, as she returned home, Sami walked beside her. His voice trembled with both joy and fear. "Do you see what has happened, Amina? They stood for you. The town stood together. This is only the beginning." Amina nodded slowly. She knew he was right. What began as a quiet act had turned into something larger than anyone could have imagined. But she also knew the truth. This was only the first victory. The rulers would not give up easily. As she closed her eyes that night, one thought burned inside her. If the people had finally found their voice, then the struggle had only just begun. The night after Amina's release, the town was no longer the same. The people who once kept their heads down now looked at each other with new eyes. Fear still lingered in their hearts, but beside it was something stronger, courage. Amina sat by her window, the same place where she had once only dreamed of change. Now, she could hear quiet voices outside, neighbors speaking to each other in ways they had never dared before. She could see candles burning in windows across the street, small lights glowing in the darkness. Each light was a symbol, the people were no longer alone. In the morning, she walked to the marketplace. The air felt different. People greeted her with nods, with smiles, with eyes filled with respect. Children ran past her, whispering her name like a secret they were proud to carry. Even those who were still afraid could not hide the truth, something had shifted forever. But the soldiers were still there. They watched carefully, standing at every corner. Their presence was a reminder, the rulers had not disappeared. The struggle was not over. Amina felt their eyes on her, but she did not lower her head. Instead, she began to help again, as she always had. She carried baskets, shared food, and listened to people's worries. And each time she did, someone else followed. The movement no longer needed her alone, it had grown into many hands, many voices. The officials inside the tall house grew restless. "This cannot continue," one said angrily. "The more we try to silence them, the stronger they become," another replied. For the first time, even the rulers began to feel fear. Meanwhile, Sami continued to gather people at night. In hidden corners, under the stars, groups sat together, whispering plans. "We will not live in silence anymore," they said. "If they touch one of us, they touch all of us." The people had found unity. And unity was stronger than any soldier. One evening, Amina stood before a small crowd. She was nervous, her hands trembling, but the people waited, their eyes fixed on her. She did not give a long speech. She did not raise her voice. She simply said, "Change does not always come from noise. Sometimes, the quietest act becomes the loudest voice." The crowd nodded, their hearts filled with fire. And so, the movement grew. It was not marked by battles or loud marches, but by everyday courage. A neighbor helping another. A child offering bread to a stranger. Families standing together when soldiers passed. The rulers could not stop it, because it was everywhere, in every small act. Amina became a symbol, not because she sought it, but because she lived it. People told her story in hushed tones that carried across towns and villages. "There was once a girl who helped when no one dared," they said. "Her quiet steps woke a sleeping people." Years later, children would still hear her name. They would learn that strength does not always come from shouting or fighting. Sometimes, it comes from standing silently, refusing to bow to fear. The town itself changed. The soldiers remained for a time, but their power weakened as the people grew stronger together. And though Amina's face faded into the crowd once more, her presence lived on in every kind hand, in every brave choice, in every person who refused to stay silent. Because what began as one small act had become a wave. And waves, once they rise, cannot be stopped. In the end, the world remembered her not for wealth, not for power, not for loud speeches, but for the quiet courage that sparked a movement. A courage that reminded everyone. Sometimes, the softest voice carries the strongest echo.